This is my little baby. Oh, such a good boy. I love you so much. But we can't film it like this, buddy. Hey y'all, it's been so long since I've done a wrap up. Today I'm going to be reviewing and ranking every book that I read in July and August from worst to best. So we have a total of nine books to talk about today. 7 thriller books, 2 horror books. Ranking them all, talking about them. But before we get into the books, I do want to take a minute to thank the sponsor of today's video, Ana Luisa. I'm just so happy to announce that I'm partnering with Ana Luisa Jewelry again because this is a company that has just grown so close to my heart this year. Ana Luisa is an ethical and a sustainable jewelry company that makes beautiful necklaces, rings, earrings, bracelets, and they offset 100% of their carbon emissions. That is just so impressive to me, and it makes me proud to have this opportunity to share more about this company with you today, especially since September is Sustainability Month. Instead of mining their gold, they give already existing gold a beautiful second life, and they only use recycled materials coming from electronic components or previously worn jewelry, and their diamonds are lab grown, so that doesn't require any mining. I'm just in love with the simplistic style of their pieces, and don't get me wrong, they really do have more statement type pieces if that's something that you are looking for, but their philosophy is less is just enough, and I just feel like that is so fitting for me and my style. For this video, they did send me 3 pieces. The first one is this miche necklace, and as you can see, I'm dressed pretty casually, but I love the pop of this green against the faded blue tee, and also this chain is very, very adjustable. Typically, I do like to wear my necklaces on the shorter side, but just depending on the neckline of like what my shirt or my dress is doing, I really like that this is so adjustable. I also have these scarlet medium hoop earrings. You might remember from last time, I was so obsessed with those scarlet hoops that were just a little bit smaller. This is just the medium size, and I am so obsessed with them. I've been wearing the little scarlet mini, or not mini, but just like the smaller scarlet hoops on the second holes. They've been so cute together. And then lastly, this Mecca off-white ring. It's adjustable. So if you're like me and you have no idea what size ring that you wear, these Ana Luisa adjustable rings are going to be perfect for you. And also, even if you do know what size you wear, what I've been doing with this one, I've been wearing it on this ring finger mostly, but I can adjust it just a little bit and then put it on my thumb, and it's the cutest little thumb ring. I have barely taken this off since I got it. I just love it so much. Prices for jewelry start at $39 and do range up to higher end prices, but everything is really super affordable, all while being just so beautiful and environmentally clean. You can go ahead and get 10% off your order today by clicking the link in my description box and using the discount code CarolineJohnson10. I just know you guys are gonna love them so much. Let's start with the book that I like the least from the past 2 months. It's a brand new release, 2021, new Megan Miranda book, Such a Quiet Place. I don't want to say I had like really high hopes for it, but I was thinking that this was gonna be really good, even though in my last wrap up, either my last wrap up or a recent video, I like swore off suburban paranoia books, turned right around and read another one this month, and sure enough, it was a 2-star from me. This book starts with a woman being released from prison, and right at the beginning, the reader finds out that this woman was in prison in the first place for allegedly murdering some of her neighbors. Now, this woman says she didn't murder anybody, so when she gets out of jail, she tries to go back to her old neighborhood and her old house with her old roommate like nothing happened. Even though these people were in court, like basically testifying against her, maybe not against her, but like not helping her case. And she just has to know that people are gonna be weird or like suspicious of her coming back. She does it anyway. And then sure enough, once she gets back, there are more deaths. Like that was just the entirety of the plot, is this woman getting out of jail and then them trying to figure out, oh, is she responsible or is she not responsible? And that back and forth, it just got old like really quickly for me. Overall, just hated the characters. Everybody, like literally everyone in the book is really unlikable, but not even in a fun way, like not even a morally gray, like, ooh, I'm gonna kind of secretly root for this person or I'm interested in what they're doing. No, like just everyone was just kind of boring and unlikable. And that just didn't sit great with me after finishing it. Next on the list is a book called Falling. This is one that I had unreasonably high expectations for on the premise alone. We'll get to that in just a second. But first, just really fast, I have to mention I did rate this book 3 stars. So that means I did like the book and I recommend it in general. So also, that means that the rest of the books in the video I liked and would recommend them. Anyway, back to the plot of the book. It is really simple and it had me hooked right from the beginning. It's about this man who is a pilot and he gets on his airplane to fly a group of passengers somewhere, and once he's on the plane, he realizes that his family has been taken hostage by a terrorist, and the terrorist gives him this ultimatum of either his family can survive or the passengers on his plane can survive. So this pilot has to decide if he's going to crash the plane where the terrorist tells him to crash it, or his family is going to be murdered. The things that really stood out to me about this book, number one is the pace. It was a really, really fast-paced read, and that's totally what I was expecting from it just from reading the inside flap of the book. I was expecting it to be really page-turning and really exciting, and it definitely was. I also want to say it has one of the most graphic prologues I've ever read. It was really gory and gross and it was just crazy, and right up front it just grabbed me and pulled me in. But the other thing I really like about this book was just that basic moral question: are my family's lives more valuable than the lives of the people on this plane? It's just so interesting to me, and in that regard it really reminded me of The Test by Sylvain Neuvel. A lot of the problems addressed in Falling, I feel like were also covered in The Test, and I think it's really interesting to explore these moral and philosophical debates in a fictional setting. But I did give this 3 stars. There were a few problems I had with it, mostly that I did not really like the perspectives that were not on the plane. So of course we're following this pilot, and we also have some scenes with another woman who is on the plane, but we're also seeing what's happening back on the ground. So we see his family being taken hostage, and the terrorist of course gets an entire spiel about why he is doing what he is doing. I even think it could have been more powerful without the person responsible having a reason to do what they're doing. Or maybe they did have a reason, but maybe the reader doesn't have to know. I feel like that would have made me a little bit more uneasy than like having to break away from these intense moments to hear them talk about why they were doing what they were doing. Also, we're getting this agent's perspective who is also on the ground, and that really was my least favorite part of the book. Like at most, we could have had the plane, what was going on the plane, and then what was going on with the man's family. I can understand that, but I really didn't think we needed a third perspective thrown into the mix as well. It just kind of was a lot going on for what I thought was going to be like a really, really simple plot. And again, it was good. I just think by the end there was too much going on. And I also am not going to spoil anything, but I did not like the ending of this book. I didn't like it. Moving on to The Retreat by Mark Edwards. I gave this book 3.5 out of 5 stars, and I had no expectations going into this. I found this as an audiobook on Scribd, and I listened to it mostly when I was driving to the beach in July, but I didn't finish it up until August. So the retreat that the title is referring to is a writer's retreat in this secluded town. I don't want to call it an isolated setting, but they're in a remote area, and readers find out at the beginning of the book that the woman who runs this retreat lost both her daughter and her son in an accident a few years ago. Their daughter supposedly fell into a river, and then the father jumped in to save her and he died, and then the daughter was never found. So she was presumed dead, but the mom is still convinced that she is alive and out there somewhere. So then the actual story begins when this horror author goes to the retreat trying to like knock out a new book, and he becomes obsessed with the idea of either proving that her daughter is dead or finding the daughter and letting them have peace either way. The beginning and the setup of this book were so eerie, and it really was genuinely creepy to listen to, and I felt a lot of building, I felt a lot of tension, I felt like I was being left out of stuff that I needed to know, and I was trying to put the pieces together. But then after the beginning ended and the middle kind of commenced, I felt like it was just more of the same. But then the ending hits, and it was so drawn out but so good. And honestly, this book really does feel like 2 completely different books in one. Like the entire last third of the book felt like its own book to me. It could have been a great standalone in my opinion. And yeah, it all connects, it all ties together, but just the 2 vibes going on were just so different, because we go from like eerie, scary, atmospheric to very straightforward, realistic horror almost. Maybe not horror, but just like a really terrifying situation. I know that I just made it sound like all of the creepiness was building to that, but just trust me when I say like the vibes fell off. But again, I mean, I did like the book. I didn't have any expectations going into it, so I wasn't disappointed. This was very much of a slow burn. I just want to make sure I'm hitting that home. This is a slow burn book, but if you like reading things about writers as much as I do, then I think that that's enough for you to pick this book up, because it was so fun for me to see how the writers interacted with each other at the house. I didn't mention it, but the horror author is not the only person staying at the retreat. Of course, there's a group of other people there, and I just really liked seeing them write, but I also really liked the scenes where they were talking and arguing to each other, because writers can be so pompous and pretentious and conceited, and it's just like, it's so funny to me. I found it really funny, and I really enjoyed that part of the book too. Now we're moving on to another slow burn, which ironically, or unironically, or yeah, ironically, is called A Slow Fire Burning by Paula Hawkins. This was probably in my top 5 most highly anticipated books of 2021, and I liked it. I gave it 3.5 stars. That's pretty middle of the road for me. Actually, I was super high on this book, both while I was reading it and right after I finished it. I was really pumped. I was really excited about this book. But now, looking back, I've kind of bumped it down to like a 3.5 in my mind, because I do not spend any time at all thinking about this book at all. Like I've not thought about it since I finished it. Let me start off by saying there are a lot of perspectives to follow here, and I did listen to this as an audiobook, so that's not my favorite way to read books that have a lot of different characters to keep track of, especially when they're getting their own voices and their own narrations. It was a little difficult and confusing for me at first, but that might just be because I was reading it via audiobook. But once I got it straight of like who everybody was, I really enjoyed it. It's about this man who is murdered on this boat, and then we branch off into the lives of these 3 different women who are somehow connected to this man. Like I said, this is a slow burn book. It's a little bit boring, but I didn't mind it in this case because I really like Paula Hawkins' writing, and I really liked her previous 2 books. I was really excited about this book. I was listening to it as an audiobook, so I felt like I was flying through it. And also, I felt like it was really satisfying how all the different characters were kind of connected at the end, like how everything ended up coming together. It was just far enough out there for me to not see it coming, but at the same time, everything made sense to me. And that's my favorite type of ending, something that I possibly could have seen coming but didn't. Next is another book that I rated 3.5 stars, but I liked it just a little bit more, and that is The Final Girls Support Group by Grady Hendrix. This is my fourth Grady Hendrix book I've read. I consider him to be one of my favorite authors, even though I don't typically rate his books super highly. I really think this book might be my favorite Hendrix, and it's just a 3.5, but we'll get into why I do that in just a second. First of all, this book has a super cool premise. So you know in horror movies how there is the final girl trope of like this one woman fighting against the evilness going on, and by the end of the movie she's the last person standing, and typically she even kills the monster or the villain or the killer or whoever, and she is now the final girl. So that book is playing on that trope, and this is about a bunch of girls who have experienced real life horror. I mean, this is a fictional book, but in the book, these women have really been true life final girls. And then from having that final girl label on them, they were kind of pushed into the spotlight and made friends with each other and formed this final girl support group. And they have been meeting for quite some time now, like years and years and years. And they have a therapist and everything. And they meet once a month in their little final girl support group and just catch up. But as the years have gone by, they have just grown apart in more ways than one. And at the beginning of the book, we're watching them try to decide if this is something they even want to continue. Some of the women are like, we don't really even need to do this anymore. But then they find out that one of their friends, one of the final girls, has been murdered. So of course the story takes off from there. This is one of the 2 horror books that I read this month, and yes, there was horror, but it really felt like a thriller book to me. This book definitely is a slasher, but I feel like it just didn't go there like Grady Hendrix typically does. Like I never felt truly grossed out. Maybe I'm just like building up my threshold for what I can like take in a book, but this didn't feel too horrific to me. Oh my gosh, I just realized I've not been holding up any of the books for this video. Oh my gosh. Why did I do that? I really loved reading about the women in this book. I really liked the characters. I really liked the female friendships. I feel like Grady Hendrix just does female friendships so well, and he does make his characters feel like authentic people. That was probably my favorite part of the book. And then also really liked the plot. I liked what was going on, so I was like, what could possibly go wrong? If you watch Black Mirror, there's an episode, I don't know which season it is, but it's one of the later seasons, and the episode is called Black Museum, I think. And there's a part near the end of the book that kind of culminates in a moment kind of like that episode. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about or not, but I thought it was so cool, so good. And then the book kept going, and then it ended again. And I was like, okay, I mean, that's fine. And then we kept going, and I was like, what are we doing? You know that TikTok where they're like, that's enough, that's enough, that's enough slices. Like, that's how I felt. It's too many endings, but 3.5 stars. I still love Grady Hendrix. I will still read anything that he writes. Next, we're moving on to Ace of Spades. I gave this book 4 stars, and I listened to this as an audiobook too. I was talking about audiobooks a bit ago. I think this is probably technically dark academia. It is set at a private school called Niveus, I do think, and it's following the only 2 black students at this school, Chiamaka and Devon. And the book starts out with them both finding out that they are going to be part of, not student council, but they're gonna be like a head boy and head girl for their class, and they are the only black students for the school. Chiamaka is somebody who, like, people could have seen this coming. She was fully expecting it, but Devon definitely was not. He is kind of more of an outcast. He's more musical, but somehow mysteriously he's kind of won this popularity contest. Then shortly after that, people in the school start getting these anonymous text messages from somebody named or I don't remember. I'm thinking about Pretty Little Liars now. I can't remember what their name was. They're getting these mysterious text messages now, and the messages are airing Chiamaka and Devon's secrets, and the secrets, like, they're escalating. I mean, they start off pretty bad, pretty, like, very real problems, but not only are they getting worse, but readers start to learn some things that Chiamaka and Devon, like, don't want to get out. And so you're seeing it build up to, like, oh my gosh, are these secrets going to get revealed eventually too? There are a lot of great conversations about race and about sexuality in this book. There were a lot of just really surprising moments for me too. And when I say surprising moments, I mean like twists. There were a lot of plot twists at the end of the different parts in the book where I would have to pause and just reflect on what was going on, because it got pretty wild. I do think that it is kind of easy to see what is going on pretty early, but that didn't take away from any of my enjoyment of the story. And I really want to say, if this is one that you've been wanting to read because you've heard about all of the positive buzz surrounding this book, I really think you probably will like it if it sounds good to you, because it is just what it sounds like. Everyone's been saying, oh, it's Gossip Girl meets Get Out. It is. Like, if that sounds good to you, then you're gonna like it. Now we're getting into my top 3 favorite books of the month. Let's go ahead and hit The Night Swim by Megan Golden. This was a 4.5 star read for me. Jess from Books Past Bedtime sent this to me. Thank you, Jess. I loved it. I loved this book. Now, there is just a lot going on in this story, so I'm gonna do my best to explain it in a way that is very concise and also makes sense. First and foremost, we're following this woman named Rachel, and Rachel hosts a true crime podcast. And for this season, she is going to be covering a rape trial as it is unfolding. So we're gonna think about this book kind of in 3 different sections. So that would be section 1 is Rachel and her life. And yeah, she's doing the podcast, but we're not hearing the podcast itself. We're just following Rachel on this investigation. And then section 2, it is going to be the podcast itself. We do get to read the podcast, and I actually read this as a hybrid. I listened while I read it. Thank you so much, Sarah from Sarah's Shelves, for recommending that I do that, because you're right, it is the superior reading experience for The Night Swim. This one is on Scribd, so if you've got Scribd, you can listen to it and read along, or just listen, because the podcast, it sounded like a true crime podcast, and it was just so satisfying. And then section 3 is a little bit more mysterious, because there is, and when I say section, I should just be saying like maybe a subplot. I don't know what I'm talking about, but there is a part in this book where this woman is reflecting back on her childhood and her sister's death. And the death was initially ruled a suicide, but the woman, who is grown now, is convinced that her sister did not kill herself. And this person's like begging Rachel, please, please, please investigate this case because I think you can solve it. And even if you can't solve it, it can bring it back into the public eye and give it enough attention to where maybe now someone can come forward with new information, all of that, you know, like she wants this murder to be solved. And I just really think this is a beautiful story. It is a very, very emotional read. There are a lot of court scenes going on in this book and a lot of like lawyer jargon, and I like stuff like that, and even I kind of was getting a little, not confused, but a little bored with it at times. But overall, this was so compelling, and this is something that has been so high on my TBR for so long, and I knew I was gonna love it. And I don't know why I put it off for so long. I'm so glad I finally read it now. Last thing I'm gonna say, I do want to make a quick pitch for if you have read this book and you really loved it. I would highly, highly, highly recommend checking out Know My Name by Chanel Miller, because so much of what was going on in this book has to have been based on what Chanel Miller went through with the Stanford swimmer sexual assault case. Ugh. I feel like I haven't mentioned it in a while, but that probably is the best book I've ever read. Chanel's nonfiction memoir, it's called Know My Name. Probably the best book I've ever read. Not just for content, like the content is so intense, so important, like it's just the most important story I've ever read, but also Chanel is just such a talented writer. So just in general, my pitch is that I think everybody should read that if you feel like emotionally you are able to handle it, but especially if you liked The Night Swim and are looking for something like this, similar to this, with this type of emotion, but without anything fictionalized, just a true memoir. Please read Know My Name. It's fantastic. Now for the 5-star reads. One is Ghost Summer by Tananarive Due. Now I have to say, this was the only book that I read in July, or I should say, this is the only book that I finished in July. I started a lot of books in July. This is the only one I finished. This is an anthology series, so it's a collection of short stories that all focus in on Afrofuturism, which is also known as Black speculative fiction. I listened to this as an audiobook because a little birdie told me that Tananarive herself was going to come in after each short story and explain why she included it in this collection and why she wrote it, what the themes of the story were supposed to mean, or like the anthology series that they might have been originally published in. It was so interesting. I got to a point where I was looking forward more to hearing her insight about why and how she wrote these stories than like reading the stories themselves. And she was narrating that part of the audiobook, and she did narrate a few of the stories too. I can't remember the last time that I tried to review a group of short stories, but I do want to put it out there. I did not rate each of the stories and then average it together to get 5 stars. I just read all of them and then settled on 5 stars. So is every single story a 5-star? No, not at all. There were definitely some 3 stars sprinkled in there, but just as a whole, it was such a powerful collection of work. And it is so unlike anything I've ever read. I'm not saying it's unlike anything that's ever been written, because I don't read a lot of sci-fi, and a lot of these books took a dystopian and a sci-fi turn, but it felt so fresh to me, so different than what I've been reading recently. And actually the first part of the book takes place in Florida, and it's like in this haunted town, and it was just perfect for July because of the summer setting. It was so good. I do remember that my favorite story in the collection was the title story. It was called Ghost Summer, and it is the longest story in the collection. It almost could be like a little novella, like a little standalone book. Oh, it was so powerful. And I'm struggling with how to talk about this book because there are like 3 different parts, and they kind of go in to exploring different genres. Like at first we are talking about mostly like horror, but then we get into like historical horror, still speculative fiction. It's all speculative, and then we do take that turn into sci-fi, and then there are a lot of short stories that are connected to each other. Like one of them is told in like a few different parts at the end, so it starts to feel like you're reading a little series. It was just so exciting because I didn't know it was coming next. I really highly recommend this book. I would be really surprised if it does not end up being on my top 10 list of 2020. And then with me saying that, of course, this book I'm going to talk about next, it definitely is going to be on my top 10. Oh, did I say 2020? I meant 2021. You know what I meant. But Blindsided by Karen Slaughter. my #1 of July and August. Here's my little tattered, crusty copy, mass market paperback version. I'm actually just gonna put a picture up. Blindsided by Karen Slaughter is the first book in the Grant County series. Blindsided is the only Karen Slaughter book that's not a standalone that I have finished so far, so I don't know all about it, but just in case you were curious, it is book 1 in the Grant County series, and this book follows basically 3 people. The first one is Sarah. Sarah is a physician in the county, and she is also the county coroner, and her ex-husband is Jeffrey. He is the police chief in the county. Their banter is so good. And then also we're following Lena, who works for Jeffrey. She's a detective. I didn't love Lena. I felt like she was pretty unlikable, but I also feel like she kind of got set up for maybe a nice little character arc throughout the rest of the series, so I'm gonna give her a break. Also, her sister, like her twin sister who's blind, gets brutally murdered at the very beginning of the book, so I need to go easier on her. Like, I understand she was just going through it in this book maybe. This is easily the graphic, goriest, grossest book I've ever read in my life. Some of the scenes in this book, some of the descriptions really made me want to throw up. Like, I was so nauseous reading. Karen does not miss. This book is amazing. I touched on it earlier, but there is a brutal murder right up front at the beginning of the book, and from there, the 3 characters that I just described have to work together. There's definitely a killer on the loose, and even if he's not like killing these women, he's leaving them so seriously injured that things don't go great for them. It's hard not to spoil because there are so many twists really early in the book. I absolutely love these characters, most specifically Sarah Linton. She's described as being really tall, like 5'10". She's got long red hair, and I am picturing the woman from Oculus as her because she's like a tall woman with long red hair. And oh my gosh, Sarah's chemistry with her ex-husband Jeffrey, I was so obsessed with it. Like, I cannot wait to continue the series with Kiss Cup because I am so invested in their story. Like, just as much as I was invested in them solving the crimes. It's so good. I'm sorry I don't have anything else to say about it. It's hard to talk about thrillers without spoiling things. And I've already talked about how much I love the characters. I've talked about how exciting the book was and how gruesome it was. Lenny popped in just in time to say goodbye to everybody. But yeah, Blindsided by Karen Slaughter was my favorite book of the month. I'm so excited to continue the series. And I guess that's it for the wrap up. And just popping back in to say, make sure you check out the description box, check out that link to Ana Luisa's website, use my discount code CarolineJohnson10 to get 10% off your Ana Luisa order. All right guys, well thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. Bye.